For more on this, we are now joined virtually by political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng, who will talk to us more about the EFF's celebrations over the weekend. Asanda, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. You know, when we talk about the EFF, we saw their celebrations taking place this weekend, marking 10 years. What do you make of their celebrations? You know, many said that the hard work that the party did over the past couple of months has indeed paid off.
I think that, it was a very interesting celebration. I think that, it's been a long and a hard 10 years for the EFF to put the ideas and the issues of Black people to the forefront of everyone's mind and to bring forward a more radical twist, according to South African terms, even though I don't necessarily think it's radical, a more radical twist to South African politics and a more forceful and unapologetic calls for land expropriation, more unapologetic calls for an end to racism and, the recognition of Blacks as fully human and deserving of full human dignity despite the brutality and the traumatization that we have experienced in the past.
And Asanda, going into these 10-year celebrations at FNB Stadium, of course, we saw from the party saying that leaders who did not ensure that their constituencies are represented by ensuring that buses are there to ferry their supporters will not be allowed to attend that gathering. What do you make of this consequence management in which Julius Malema said that South Africans are used to mediocre coming out from some of the politicians, when it goes into the elections and how it has planned? What do you make of the consequence management now being done by the EFF?
Well, I think it's not surprising. Julius Malema and the EFF wanted a full stadium, and if that meant threatening a few people with consequences if that didn't happen, then I'm not surprised that that's what they did. And they did get a full stadium as they had wanted. And I think, when you are a young party that is less than 10 years old, you do need to constantly be showing force in a way that, for instance, the ANC takes organizing and filling up a stadium for granted because it's been doing that for, more than 100 years. And so I think that, it doesn't surprise me that there would be quite harsh in the consequences that people would face if they didn't do what has been asked for, particularly when it comes to management, when it comes to the management of the logistics and ensuring that, they have promised people a show and they have promised people a full stadium, and that's what they were going to get no matter what, and they did.
And coming out of this weekend, of course, the hot topic is indeed that chant, that slogan, kill the Boer. Once again, Julius Malema singing and chanting that song at the FNB Stadium. What do you think when you look at Julius Malema and how he went about making sure that he will indeed sing that song, knowing very well that it was before the courts, and it's something that many South Africans or some South Africans find very uncomfortable with him singing, hence why we saw that court action being taken by AfriForum?
Well, it doesn't surprise me on either end because I think, Black people have a right to sing their struggle songs. They have a right to reminisce about the struggle that they've just, underwent, and that's still incomplete. And I think that, people should have a right to sing songs of the past that speak to the people they feel have oppressed them and continue to oppress them. And I think, it's ludicrous, this idea that the DA has taken this as far as the UN Human Rights Council and all of that. Why aren't they taking, racism in South Africa and the continued racist acts by, the DA itself that they support to the UN Human Rights Council? Why are they only suddenly understanding knowing that these institutions exist and that human rights are something that should be fought for when it's Black people people who are calling for whatever it is that they're calling for. It doesn't surprise me because, of course, if you are the DA, you are a political party that constantly says that they don't recognize the importance of having race be a factor in policy making. In fact, they don't think race should play any factor at all, and they see themselves as colorblind. And that's anybody that does that is somebody who refuses to acknowledge, apartheid and the role that it played, and colonialism before that, and every other system of oppression, including slavery before that, and the role that it played and continues to play in South Africa, and how the past is linked to the present. That's why to this day in South Africa, to be white is to be wealthy, and to be black is to be poor, because that's how the government set it up. And so what we're seeing is what we're seeing globally, wherein racist white people who are used to getting their own way, who are used to being at the center of dialogue and conversations, are going as far as using the very instruments that have been put in place to protect those who have been marginalized, who have been racialized, and who have been minoritized. And they are now taking those very instruments and using them against those very people. And I think it would be amiss of the UN Human Rights Council to find any other way, or to not actually engage with that perspective and with the fact that we are coming out of a white-dominated, brutal system of apartheid as South Africa, and that there isn't, anywhere on the planet that South Africa, or white South Africans in particular, can go and claim to be the new victims after denigrating black lives for so long.
And, many are talking about why Malema took it this far this time around. We know that it's the 2024 elections next year. Why do you think he took this approach, especially considering that he's had so many people try to challenge, his stance when it comes to struggle songs?
Well, it makes sense that he would take it this far, because remember, ultimately we have to get to a point where we stop having debates about who can and can't be racist. Black people can't be racist, for example, in the same way that, members of the LGBTI community cannot be homophobic. And so we need to stop having these non-debates. And so it makes sense that Julius Malema would take it as far as possible, because of course he knows that the DA is going to take it legally as far as possible. And whatever the outcome at the end, hopefully we'll come to a conclusion that leads to black people not having to constantly argue and debate about who is right and wrong when it comes to issues of racism, which will pave the way for us being able to talk about racism, for us being able to hold those who are perpetrators of racism in South Africa accountable without being scared that they're going to turn around and accuse us of the very thing that they are the perpetrators of. And I think, we don't talk enough about institutionalized racism and the ways in which systems are used, and the ways in which, as I said, organizations that are meant to be for the protection of human rights of those who are marginalized, who are racialized, and who are excluded from all forms of society, these institutions are now being used by those who dominate society, those who have economic means, and those who have social systems and social capital. This is the nature of institutionalized racism. That's what it does. It uses the power that it has, which it seems it thinks that power extends all the way to the UN human rights. And the UN human rights system is going to have to show us, as first of all South Africans, but I think as black people, how far the power of white supremacy goes, depending on how they engage on this particular topic. But I think, I want to mention that I think that there are, if I was the DA, there are so many other things that I would critique the EFF, and in particular Julius Malema, on, including things like elevating himself and putting himself at a higher status physically to the people that he leads, after talking about having started the political party, wanting to be one of the people. I would also, be criticizing and critiquing and challenging, whether he's going to be able to maintain the popularity with young people who have called him out on his stance on immigration, legal and illegal, and who are saying that they want to have this tough conversation about immigration, and he has stuck to his guns, talking about Pan-Africanism, which of course makes sense because Julius Malema is very popular across the African continent. In fact, there's an EFF Namibia and there's EFFs popping up across the continent. So it makes sense that he wouldn't want to upset those future potential vote brokers, because we've seen that, he's in the Pan-African Parliament and he's trying to not only be a big man in South Africa, but also be a big man across the continent. And this harks to my mind to an old school type of politics that is about being the big man of Africa in an era where people are moving away from those kind of politics and are trying to move more towards politics where they see themselves as equal to the people. So you'll see, for instance, globally, people are now, not taking the bodyguards, using the same house that they had before they were elected, and doing all kinds of things like taking public transport and showing themselves to be, with the people rather than elevated from the people. And so it's going to be interesting how, his belief and his approach and his old school type of approach to politics is going to fare in the upcoming election, and how young people are going to engage him when it comes to this critical issue that there has been a lot of debate in South Africa about.
Yeah. And Asanda, maybe let's delve into the DA for a moment, and maybe let's talk about the optics of their sideshow and basically what it means for their constituency going into the elections next year. Why do you think they've played into this arena that the EFF has indeed created going into the 2024 elections? Because you would remember during the last elections, they dropped significantly in terms of their numbers when it comes to their constituency and lost some of those voters to the Freedom Front Plus. Do you think that, this is a way for them, to pave the way for their campaign for next year?
Yes, the DA is definitely going for the conservative / racist / focused on self white voter. They're not interested in black voters. They're not interested in the majority. And for as long as that is the case, we're going to see a lot more conservative politics. And if you look at their politics, you can see very clearly that they are inspired by conservatives in the US who are quite racist and actually bigots in a lot of ways. And so we're going to see this kind of American style politics sweeping. And also, by the way, we need to watch out for the fact that the DA is increasingly kind of painting itself as an entity that has a global standing and is really punching above their weight. We saw them at US Congress going and challenging South Africa's official opposition at US Congress at a time when South Africa was talking about and being in allyship with Russia. They were going to the US and supporting it, and we're seeing it now going all the way to the UN because they figure that this goes in line with their vision of wanting to be a regional state, almost like the United States, which has all kinds of different rules depending on which state you are. And so that's the thing that I'm reading into, that I think we need to be awake to the idea that the DA is acting and representing itself as an individual political party that is in charge of what it seems and thinks about as an independent state within South Africa, rather than engaging as a political party within South Africa that has to take into consideration the very specific politics of South Africa and the very specific history of South Africa.
All right, Asanda, thank you so much for your contributions on the show. That is Asanda Ngoasheng, a political analyst. They're talking about the EFF and, of course, what has come out of that 10-year celebration, mainly being that chanting and that slogan of "Kill the Boer," which was said by Julius Malema.